Yeah, as someone said, that says everything. The Republicans did not join in the USA chants.
No.
Apparently they're not for that if Joe Biden is for that.
Right.
Because Joe Biden is for. Okay. One of the things that makes America great is, of course, some of our great representatives. I am like that little girl that was not ready for President Obama to leave. I am not ready for John Yarmuth to leave Congress.
It's okay. We got to vote for another president.
Congressman.
I'm not ready for a new one.
Oh. Okay. Good morning, Representative John Yarmuth.
Good morning, Stephanie.
For instance, as many years as you've been coming on, I did not know there was actually a Bourbon Caucus, and you, of course, are the head of it. So I
founded it, actually. First couple of months I was here, Mike Thompson, who represents the Napa Valley, invited me to a wine caucus event. So I said, wine caucus, is there a Bourbon Caucus? He said, I don't think so.
Listen, I don't know for sure, but I feel like these moments with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, booing the president, screaming at him, at one point when he was talking about his dead son, I have to imagine that's part of the reason you're leaving Congress. These people they're just garbage people, those two. I mean, the people just do not belong in this body.
Right. Well, and there are a lot of them, and it says a lot about what our politics has devolved to, and it's not an original thought, but this is all performance art. They're only there to get attention.
Yeah.
They have no interest in governing. They have no interest in policy. It's just about getting likes on your Twitter feed and raising money to no end. And that's kind of where the Republican Party's gotten now these days. It's not that there aren't some Republicans who are interested in governing. They just don't have a lot of support from the rest of their party. And when Mitch McConnell said, what are you for? He was asked, what are you for? And he said, elect me and I'll tell you. And then Rick Scott actually comes up with an agenda which is so heinous and so potentially damaging political that Mitch has to rebuke him.
Yeah.
So
isn't that something that Mitch McConnell had to rebuke because he's like, you idiot.
Yeah.
I said, don't tell them what we're for. You told them. And that was the point. The only, I thought it was an incredibly unifying and bipartisan speech, too much so for my taste. There was no, mention last night of, this party openly rooting for Putin or of January 6th. So I think the president was remarkably restrained in his speech, but you're absolutely right. The only thing he did say was just the truth is about the tax cut for the top 1%, which ballooned the deficit and whatever, and then they're booing, right? It's like, well, that's all you're for.
Yeah.
What else are they for? They wouldn't even applaud for negotiating prescription drug prices. I mean, it's.
Yeah. The only thing else they're for is deregulating business, doing away with the Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act and all sorts of other things that protect the American people from corporate greed. So it's sad. As you know, I was Republican many years ago, and while I was a Rockefeller Republican, where I never would have felt comfortable. Well, I didn't feel comfortable after Reagan and left the party, but at least Republicans had some principles back then, and now absolutely none. And this latest embrace of Putin by so many of them is probably the most despicable example of how a party has truly lost its way.
Interesting, Representative, as you mentioned that. I don't know if you know, but my dad was chairman of the Republican Party, and it was his job to unite the Rockefeller Republicans, as you say, and the John Birch Society, crazier right wingers. But I just can't imagine my dad or anyone of that era would recognize this version of his Republican Party and just this classless garbage like Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Well, every Republican I talk to back home, citizen Republicans, is just they just are basically swallowing their vomit just about every day. They don't understand, and and they have strong family traditions and so forth that keep them registered that way. But then they don't support this, and they know that this is damaging to the country and it's undemocratic, and you have people there who on a daily basis violate their oath of office. That's where we are. And then we have, unfortunately, leadership, Kevin McCarthy, who won't do anything to rein them in.
No.
And that's the sign of a weak leader. That was the problem with John Boehner, and I love John Boehner. I really liked him individually, but that's what did him in, and it's done so many Republican leaders in that they don't know how to handle these.
Yeah, at least you could work out your differences, and your differences with Boehner being Merlot versus bourbon.
Right.
But you were able to.
I once ran into him at a bourbon event. He was drinking bourbon. I said, "I thought you only drink red wine." He said, "I drink anything."
I could see that. Yeah, but it's interesting. You made a point about this on Twitter, but I guess the other thing about a lot of our dads serving in World War II, like mine did, and being a Nuremberg prosecutor, just what we're watching. Not just Nazi flags showing up at Trump rallies here and neo-Nazis, but, Vladimir Putin saying he's denazifying Ukraine while he's trying to assassinate the Jewish president and bombing a Holocaust memorial. And you retweeted someone that said Kentucky Republican Representative Walker Thomas and Senator Rick Girdler both used the phrase "Jew them down" in reference to bargaining for lower prices on a lease in a committee meeting. And you said, as a Jew born just after the Holocaust, I can tell you this is increasingly common casual bigotry from today's Republican Party. It's not just a stain in our Commonwealth and our country. It's an urgent threat. Every Kentuckian must do their part to rid our government of this filth. I just never thought we'd be fighting these fights again.
What I should have said to them, and I would like to at some point say, actually, the term ought to be "Trump them down."
Yeah. Because
that's the way Trump actually ran his entire business life, is trying to either stiff his suppliers and the people he had contracts with, or pay them less. So I think we need to update the term.
Yep. I love the way you put it, by the way, speaking of Ukraine, ordinary citizens doing extraordinary things to protect their country. They deserve our total support. Again, the fact that we would have, a Putin caucus in the Republican Party here is just, again, something I never thought we'd experience on our soil.
No, and, I do think that what's happened over the last week and will unfortunately continue over the next foreseeable future is something that really is going to transform the world. I believe that, and in a positive way.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of suffering in the meantime, but I think what we've seen is a civilized world that recognizes that there still are real irrational threats to stability, and that we can't tolerate them anymore. And that's why you see countries like Switzerland and Sweden, who have studiously avoided getting involved in any sides in these battles, say neutrality is not good enough. I think that's a very, very significant development. And the unity of NATO and the European Union in pushing back, and even countries like Singapore and others who have said, no, there are two clear sides on here. There's good and evil, and we need to be.
Yeah. What else are your other general reactions to the president's speech?
Well, I thought he finally did the important thing on the domestic front in terms of identifying individual issues that American people can relate to. Child care, negotiating on drug prices, Medicare, lowering the cost of insulin, those things that people can understand. I never understood why they decided to label this massive piece of legislation Build Back Better. First of all, it sounded like the infrastructure bill, and I don't think anybody could separate the two.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for anybody to get a handle on what we were actually proposing to do for them.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad that.
But he mentioned all the specific pieces that are very popular. So are you confident we'll get some of those done? I know Joe Manchin sitting on the Republican side is not a good sign, but do you think we'll get some of those pieces done?
I think we'll get some done. I wish we would get the child tax credit for both substantive and political reasons. Because of all the things that we're proposing to do, child care, universal pre-K, senior care, all these things, the American people won't feel the effect of that for at least a couple of years, because it's going to take a while to stand those programs up. But clearly with the child tax credit, that's an immediate benefit to millions and millions of families. And I think we're unified as a party, except for Joe Manchin, that this is the key element we need to be fighting for.
Yeah.
So maybe we can get that. Clearly, childcare, I think, is probably something that will survive in whatever legislative package we come up with. But anyway, I'm glad you started talking about the individual elements. That's really important.
Have I mentioned I'm not ready for you to leave Congress yet? Okay. You are behind Senator Morgan McGarvey to be your successor. He is the Kentucky Senate Minority Leader. And I know there's another state representative, Attica Scott, who is an African American woman, is also running. You called McGarvey a true champion of progressive values. You're obviously a well-known progressive. So you said you don't know Attica well, certainly in terms of progressive credentials. They both have them. I'd be happy with that. But you don't know her well. But tell us about Senator McGarvey.
Well, Morgan McGarvey's a great young guy. He's in his early 40s, has been an amazing leader in the General Assembly of Kentucky. That's what we call our legislature. Has been able to pass bipartisan bills in a chamber where there are only 8 Democrats right now.
Wow.
38.
Yeah.
So he really does know how to get things done without compromising his progressive principles. He picks the issues where he knows he has an opportunity to succeed. So he's very pragmatic, but he doesn't shy away from the tough issues. He's taken a very strong stance on legalization of recreational marijuana, for instance, and in some cases, much more liberal than you would expect somebody in that position to be.